and the title of this message is Thy Kingdom Come. Hyde Park Union Church, I need to ask your forgiveness. The Lord's Prayer is part of the weekly order of worship, and for almost 2 years now, I have been your co-pastor. And often when it's my turn to pray the congregational prayer, I do so, but I forget to say the Lord's Prayer. It hit me midweek, this past week, Pastor Sarah. I was just resting, laying down. I woke up around Wednesday morning, and I realized that on the Sunday, last Sunday, when we started a series on the Lord's Prayer, when it was my time to pray, I forgot to pray the Lord's Prayer. And so, Hyde Park Union Church, I ask your forgiveness. I ask your forgiveness because I know this really bugs some of you. For you're so used to saying it every Sunday, and I apologize. It has simply not been committed to my muscle memory. You know, that memory that causes you to do things without thinking about it. It just has not become a habit for me as part of morning worship, and I will try to do better. That's my commitment to you. But I need to ask if we can all do better. As I commit to trying to remember to say it, can you commit to understanding what it means when you say it? And to only say it if you agree with what it means. And if you agree with what it means, can you not only say it, but can we all agree to live it? As a matter of fact, can we agree to be just as committed to living it as we are to saying it? For the days of just saying things from rote memory and not meaning them, and even more not living them, those days need to be over. I think you get my point, but here's another example. In case you don't, there's another recitation people in our country need to stop saying if they don't mean it. It goes like this: I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The days of just saying that or requiring our children to say it in public schools when our country has locked children in cages and continuously since its inception and even this morning works against the liberty and justice for all, the days of just committing things to rote memory and not really caring if we mean what we say need to be over. Because it's as if someone had a strategy that if the people, the masses, just say this stuff, they'll really believe it's true, regardless of whether it's true or not. If the masses just say this stuff, even if it's not true, it's as if someone knows that it will pacify the yearning for the manifestation of that which we say. And the power that was originally intended by these revolutionary prophetic words gets lost in their rote, habitual recitation. And the power to move people to act in alignment with the words dissipates. And the words become pretty much useless. That's why we're doing this series on the Lord's Prayer, to reclaim the power of Jesus's words to his disciples so that they shape the lives of Jesus's followers today. Jesus even cautions the disciples in verse 7. He says, when you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Then he gives him the words that we've named the Lord's Prayer. which in contrast are not empty phrases unless we empty them of their power with habitual rote memory and recitation. To say this each Sunday, except the Sundays that I forget, as rote memory without a sense of deep commitment and responsibility for its radical meaning is to empty the prayer of its power. So the whole point of this series is to reload the power back into the prayer so that as we continue to say it weekly, we might find that we may want to say it daily, especially in times like these. For in times like these, in times of multiple national, if not worldwide pandemics, we need a reminder of the power inherent to our Christian faith to counter, if not overturn, the status quo. Thy kingdom come is a radical and revolutionary, is as radical and as revolutionary as Jesus. And if you aren't convinced or simply didn't know that you were following a radical revolutionary, just keep asking yourself, why did they crucify him? And seek until you find. What you'll find is that thy kingdom come was among the most radical and revolutionary things Jesus said. And it gets to the heart of Jesus's ministry, Jesus's death, and Jesus's resurrection. To really understand what that means, we need to understand a bit about kingdoms. Kingdoms have those who reign in power, queens and or kings, and those who are subjects to that power. In other words, the powerless. In other words, a kingdom is a government led by queens or kings, and their power and authority is absolute. So thy kingdom come as a call for the full power and authority of God over and above, or better yet, in place of any power and authority of man or earthly leaders. So to make the statement, thy kingdom come, in the midst of an earthly kingdom, in the midst of a domain that already has a king or a queen, is charged language. It's not an empty phrase, quite the contrary. It's one of the most dangerous things one can say in the midst of a kingdom. To be within a kingdom as Jesus was, where the current king has absolute authority, and call on another king or queen's authority, even divine authority, to come and reign, those are actually fighting words. And they are surely words that should stir the heart of every hearer, especially hearers who are in authority, including our national leaders. And not only is thy kingdom come radical and revolutionary for calling on divine authority in the midst of earthly authority, thy kingdom come is also a prophetic phrase of Jesus the prophet. A prophet, as I shared with you in a prior sermon, interrupts what is happening in the world with directives from the divine. I like the way Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hargrove of the Poor People's Campaign puts it, that the role of a prophet is to demonstrate in word or deed that a different posture is possible in public life. The disciples asked Jesus how to pray. What should we pray? And when Jesus said, thy kingdom come, Jesus prophetically reminds us that a different posture is possible in public life. What do I mean by a different posture? I'm glad you asked. That the lame can walk, that the sick can be healed, that the hungry can be fed, that the homeless can have shelter, that the naked can have clothing, that those who mourn can be comforted, that there's good news for the poor, sight for the blind, liberation for the oppressed, and the release of prisoners. And that this is only possible if God's power and authority have complete influence over our lives and over the affairs of the land. So you want to know how to pray, disciples? Pray, thy kingdom come. Pray, God, allow your kingdom to come and rain down on us, because the current kingdom is problematic, oppressive, and in some cases demonic. And we need a different posture in public life. So pray, disciples, thy kingdom come. Thy kingdom come is first revolutionary, a revolutionary call for the divine authority to come and take over. But second, thy kingdom come is a prophetic phrase by Jesus, the prophet, that a different posture is possible in public life. And lastly, thy kingdom come is also a clarion call for followers to refuse to bow to oppressive authorities and to the images and gods, small g, of this world, but to align oneself and one's actions with divine authority. It's a clarion call not to bow, but to act. You remember the three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in the Old Testament book of Daniel, the 3rd chapter, when challenged by King Nebuchadnezzar about why they did not bow to the golden image that the king set up. Listen to the resolve of these 3 Jewish boys in Daniel 3:16. Listen to their resolve. Verse 16 says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And God will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if God doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow to King Nebuchadnezzar and the image he set up. Thy kingdom come is a declaration that I refuse to bow to an oppressive kingdom. I refuse to get caught up in the images and idols of this earthly kingdom. And even at the risk of being thrown into a fiery furnace that some folks, even family, might want to throw me into, I will not bow, I will not serve those gods, but instead I am part of ushering in God's kingdom of love and of justice and of liberation and of healing. Thy kingdom come. Thy kingdom come is a call for the replacement of man's kingdom by God's kingdom. It's a refusal to align with oppression, but to align with liberation for all of God's children. Thy kingdom come is more than a prayer, it's a call to action. You see, while Luke's version simply says that Jesus says, your kingdom come, Matthew must have had a recording with a little more content, for he takes it a step further and says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done by whom? Well, just imagine if God's will was done by the 2.5 billion Christians on earth as it is in heaven. We might have a greater realization of God's kingdom on earth right now. Thy kingdom come as a clarion call to the 2.5 billion Christians to not simply say the Lord's Prayer, but to live the Lord's Prayer. To not simply say thy kingdom come, but to live thy kingdom come. To not only live, but to lean into thy kingdom come. By lean into, I mean to be very intentional about living, about attaining the goal. Do we have any track runners in the house? Track runners know that when it's almost to the finish line, they lean into the ribbon of victory. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done should cause us to lean into the life that Jesus lived. Like love and justice and equality can actually be attained. Like we have the faith that it is possible. If we just lean into it, we can achieve it. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done should cause us to live and to lean into food and provision for the poor and the hungry. To live and lean into shelter for the homeless. To live and lean into the end of racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, and all the other isms. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done should cause us to live and lean into the end of homophobia, blackphobia, and all the other phobias. To live and lean into do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before God. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done is a call to live and lean into love of God and love of all of our neighbors. To even live and lean into liberty and justice for all. Like the one who we mourn today, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said and did so much for equality in our country. As noted this morning by the Innocence Project, they said Justice Ginsburg championed the movement for gender equality, calling it a fight for the constitutional principle of equal citizenship, stature of men and women. When asked when there would be enough women on the Supreme Court, she famously responded, when there are 9. Justice Ginsburg leaned into gender equality. But not only that, she cast important votes in support of reproductive rights, voting rights, LGBTQ rights, and criminal justice, including against the execution of juveniles and people with intellectual disabilities. Justice Ginsburg clearly understood kingdom principles. Listen to her words spoken to the Columbia Law School panel in 2018. Justice Ginsburg said, if I were a queen, there would be no death penalty. Well, you were a queen, Justice Ginsburg. You made your mark. We are grateful, and you will be sorely missed. And as I close, as our nation's leaders fight over the next person who will take the seat of a queen, people of God, in addition to preparing to vote, we need to be praying and doing and aligning ourselves and living and leaning into the revolutionary prophetic clarion call of Jesus, thy kingdom come. Hyde Park Union Church, I will do my best to remember to say it. And I ask that you do your best to not only say it, but to also live it and to lean into the finish line until God's kingdom comes and until God's will is done on earth. Say it with me, on earth as it is in heaven. God bless you.